Good afternoon. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, September 7th, 2023. It is 4:01 p.m. This session is set to go until 5 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. Assistant County Manager Rob Gilder is excused for this meeting. The topic on today's agenda is the Thurston County Equity Action.
Madam Chair, I'd like to highlight there was a typo on the printed agenda. The agenda that it was put in the calendar is correct. This briefing is from 4 to 5. However, the printed agenda that we posted on the same and the right time slot listed as from 3 to 4. This is the correct time. I'd request the board to approve the agenda.
Okay, I will finish the introduction, and then after that, we'll move on to approving the agenda. And this is the Thurston County Equity Action Plan briefing. So there has been a change to the agenda, and so is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I move to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No, ma'am.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay,
Thank
the
you.
agenda is now approved with the correct time. Thank you. Okay, so with that, I will pass it to DB. I know we have some council members present as well. And go ahead.
Thank you. So for those who don't know me, my name is Devi Ogden. I am the Racial Equity Program Manager for Thurston County, and I will let my Racial Equity Council members introduce themselves.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Keoki Kawanoi, Native Hawaiian, single father, and member of the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and all my residents here at Thurston County and beyond. My name is Dr. Osmith Jackson, and I'm a two-year resident. I'm glad to celebrate that, two-year resident of Thurston County and a proud inaugural member of the Racial Equity Committee. Thank you for allowing us to be here.
So today I'm here to provide an overview of our draft Racial Equity Action Plan. And I do want to emphasize it is in draft form. I have county leadership and stakeholders reviewing, as well as our council members reviewing the plan to provide feedback and address any questions and concerns. So this is a working document, and throughout this presentation, I'll take your questions and feedback and update the document as necessary. So I'm not going to read the plan verbatim. I'm going to go through it at a high level, but feel free to interject with any comments or questions that you might have. And as we go through this, I'm going to take note just so changes can be incorporated as necessary. So the plan begins with our introduction and includes a land acknowledgement, and I wanted to include an acknowledgement of systemic racism as well. I think that it's important in this plan to call out why we're doing this work as a county, and that's something that was also taken from the resolution 15995 where systemic racism was referenced, and so that language aligns with the language that was included in the resolution. The vision statement that you see here reads that we're a diverse community where everyone who lives, works, and plays in the county can experience a culture of equity, inclusivity, and belonging, and where everyone can thrive. And I want to be intentional about referencing inclusivity and belonging, because in this county, and anywhere, it's not enough to just have people be included. We want to make sure that those who are included have a voice and that they feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, perspectives, and contributing to the success of the county. So going through the document, you'll see that I have a section on why race. As I've been doing this work, I get that question a lot. Why are we focusing on race and not other categories like gender or socioeconomic status? And you know, in this work, we realize that there's intersectionality in the way that people live and the way that people experience oppression and their own struggles. And so what we've noticed is that when you focus on race, you're able to lift other oppressed groups as well. And so, you know, we want to be intentional about saying when we address race as a systemic issue, all of the other groups, be it socioeconomic status, gender, sexual identity, all of those struggles that people experience can be lifted as well when we're able to address race as an underlying issue. And so, you know, we don't want to avoid race as a topic. We want to be considerate and intentional in how we're approaching this plan and how we're approaching systemic change in the county. The next section that you see here is, I think it would be beneficial to have just little messages from each of our commissioners and our county manager, either as a way of endorsing the plan or just explaining to those who are reading the plan why you feel this is necessary or what you think we could get out of it as a county and as a community. So I've left that space blank. I will be meeting with each of you individually to just speak with you about the plan, get your perspectives, and then get a statement, if you feel comfortable doing so, to include in the plan.
When you say a statement, how long? Like 100 words, 10 words?
Maybe like
A
3
paragraph?
sentences, certainly less than a paragraph, 2 or 3 sentences.
I got mine all figured out.
Okay,
Send it over.
You know what it is? Is it the
Four-way
truth?
test of
Yeah.
the Rotary Club.
Yeah, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? I think it fits. I'm stealing that from you, you know?
what if that's what he wanted to say in his
I
message?
beat him
No.
to it. I know he's a Rotarian, that's all, see, so I just beat him to it.
Oh, but we will,
That's
I
my
will,
statement. and
I
I'm
will make
sticking
sure to
it.
connect with everyone to get their preferred language to put in the plan. So that's just the introduction. The next section is the actual plan, and I do emphasize that this is a living document. So this is phase 1 that's presented, and this plan should and will change over the next few years based on how we are seeing success and how we're navigating our challenges. So, you know, I do want to say that there may be failure in some of what we're trying to do. There may be mistakes. We may want to try and make some changes and find that really it doesn't work for our county or our community. And that's okay, because we will take a step back, reassess, and work with the community and stakeholders to figure out what's the best way to move forward. And so, again, that's why this is a living document. This phase 1, the approach is to provide a guideline for how we move forward in assessing where we are and what's working and not working for county employees and for our community, to include residents and community groups. So as I go through each goal, there's 3 goals in this plan. You'll see that I've identified what the goal is and then kind of an overview that explains where the goal comes from. Because this plan does not include authentic community input, meaning there wasn't time to engage the community in the actual development of this plan, I did specifically call that out in here to say these goals were developed just based on observation and communication from council members and from talking with our elected officials and department directors. And so the next iterations of the plan absolutely will be developed with community engagement and input and county stakeholder employee engagement and input. Each goal outlines, so each strategy within the goal, there are deadlines that I've included, and these deadlines come from talking with leadership throughout the county, and really these deadlines assess what's reasonable. So even if you see something that says a deadline is not until the end of next calendar year, that gives us time to assess the work that we're doing and assess whether it's successful or not. But that's not to say that we have to wait until, you know, December 2024 to achieve some of these strategies. So in a few of them, I would anticipate that we would find success and be ahead of our deadlines. And some of them, we may be, you know, reaching our deadlines on time. But just keep that in mind that the deadlines are reasonable and help us, give us enough time to achieve these strategies. So the first goal is to increase the understanding of institutional and structural racism among people who work for and represent the county. And the reason for this is we want to establish a foundation of understanding on why we're doing this work, why it's beneficial for every employee, for our communities to be on board and support these efforts, and to help folks understand what even diversity, equity, inclusion is. I know that there's been either piecemeal conversations or even trainings that have occurred throughout the county, but I think having a consistent foundation for everyone to understand and be on the same page really will help us be able to build, you know, operationalizing equity in our work in a successful manner. So the first goal focuses is on building that foundation. So the first strategy that you see here is by March 2024, I will work with directors to establish equity leads in county departments and offices. Now, this is an assertive goal, but I think one of the easier ones to reach. The reason that I think it's beneficial to have equity leads in all of our departments and offices is because I cannot do this work alone. I need the support of our departments and offices and county leadership to actually do this work. And so equity leads would be folks who are
Finish your sentence.
Okay. Equity leads are folks who will be identified, they either are self-identified and volunteer, or their supervisors, directors may pick them and say, you have capacity, you have the passion to do this. And they would serve as the liaisons between me and the departments and offices.
I guess what happens if a department or office chooses not to participate?
I think
So
that's,
the answer to that question to the departments is pretty simple.
Yeah.
The departments is pretty simple.
I'd say it's pretty
Yeah,
simple. for
that
the
was
department.
not, I was trying to
Yeah, but,
encapsulate, I know with
what
the
I think is,
departments.
with the offices, I think that, what Debbie has the challenge is to, the offices understands the value of this process. And when the offices understand the value, I believe there's gonna be a buy-in.
And is there any problem if it's raised with bargaining on this, if it would be a new assignment? Would it be a bargaining issue?
I don't know if,
I mean, that question ought to at least be asked because it may come up. I don't know. I don't know that it
We'll
would come up.
probably,
but-
you know, on the finding equity leads, you know, have to work with the directors. And it has to be on a will and basis.
Well, yeah,
If it-
but
if
I
it's
mean,
a-
maybe two people want it. Who gets
Yeah,
it?
if it-
Seniority or? I don't know.
I don't know. So that's a good question.
Just
We
a
can explore
question.
that.
yeah, so actually there's a couple of methods that can be used. Either it's an application process, if there's more than one person interested in a department or office. I would like to meet with everyone that's interested, or at least review some content of theirs to understand what their passion is, why they wanna do this work, what they feel they can offer. But I would have conversations with supervisors and directors because I need to be considerate of current workload capacity. And having been in a similar role in previous positions, it's additional work. And so that's something that I would discuss with supervisors and employees so that they know what they're taking on and what the commitment is.
Yeah, as we move forward, right, and an office decides they would not like to participate, I would like to know, right, and I think it would be good to know the why as well.
Exactly.
And,
And you as peers of your elected officials, that will be a fair question.
I appreciate that because I think to see success in this plan and in this work, your support and your awareness of what's happening is crucial. So that is the first strategy. Let me back up and say that you will have a plan to vote on in December. So as I'm briefing you right now, again, this is a draft. I'll work with you and other stakeholders to update it, and then ideally the plan is voted on in December, ideally approved, and then implemented in January. So hence all of the deadlines are based on a January implementation. So the next strategy is partnering with HR, our training and development coordinator, to develop a training plan for the county. I mentioned that there are some departments and offices that have done their own DEI training, whether that's bringing in someone from the outside or finding just free resources out there. But again, having a consistent message about why we're doing this work and consistent foundation established is beneficial for the success of this work. So I'll be working with our training coordinator in developing a plan that takes into account really the busy seasons for some departments. Like, I don't want to be requiring training for the budget office during budget season. I know how that goes. So that's sort of the criteria that would go into this plan to make sure that we're not burdening any of our employees by asking to take this training. I would like the training to be required. I understand that that's a policy process, so I will be drafting a policy for this training and routing it to you all for discussion, review, and approval. Because,
I have a question for that.
yes,
So I understand that the sheriff was over to ask about sexual harassment or something in that area. I missed that particular meeting. And having training to cover some of that. So why couldn't, if there was gonna be any kind of mandatory training, why couldn't we include some, combine some different topics? Why does it have to be exclusive is my question, I guess.
right now, my understanding is that there is required sexual harassment training.
Well, I'm asking how come it
It
couldn't
can't
be
be
combined?
included.
What I think, if I may,
Yes, sir.
so to give you context, the sheriff came on Tuesday and made an argument that he was going to plan to hire a consultant to develop a specific training related to sexual harassment for the whole entire sheriff's office. I believe when Commissioner Erbo says if within that curriculum,
Yeah.
why not add in some racial equity components? Is that
Well, yeah, let's combine things whenever we can, just to save the taxpayer money, that's all.
That may be something that you may wanna reach out to the sheriff and may have that conversation.
Yeah,
If
to
that
see who
creates
he's
an opportunity.
working with.
And see if it fits. I don't even know if it'll fit.
No, but
Yeah.
that's a good
It'll fit,
question.
maybe not.
There's no reason not to have
Yeah.
that conversation.
Pardon?
I said that there's no reason to not have that conversation. However, I would say that the sheriff had selected a very specific trainer who is geared toward law enforcement. And perhaps that could be part of the curriculum, but
Was that decision made? Did we already make that decision? The board? Did you? Oh, okay. Okay.
So a conversation with the sheriff.
Yeah,
would be-
I
would be
will-
good.
I'll touch
It
base
won't
with
hurt to
him.
talk.
Absolutely.
So that's the training plan. So the next strategy, I would be working with our equity leads once they're established to conduct a survey amongst our county employees to assess their understanding of why we're doing this, what does equity mean, institutional, systemic racism, internal bias, ideally with a 50% response rate. So I know that there was a survey done, I think last year, and in talking with some folks throughout the county, we've kind of settled that it's best to do a new survey, ask some different questions because too much time has passed since that first survey and I don't believe the results were set out. So it's best to just do a new survey, ask some different questions and see what we can get. And that survey, those results will guide the type of trainings that we look for. So
What does 50% response mean?
that 50% of our,
Yeah, but I mean, what does it entail? Does it, checking a block, writing a paragraph or sentence or?
in the
attending
survey,
Training, what does 50% mean?
50% of the employees.
Of that particular division, I take it?
No,
of all county employees have responded.
Approximately
All county employees.
600 employees will respond to the survey.
That would be the 50%.
Hoping that that's what you get for a
That is-
response.
That is the-
That
that is
the
the- that
desired
is the goal.
response rate, yeah.
50% response time.
Okay.
Originally,
Which
I
is
had it a little bit
successful. That's a
higher,
very- that is
but
a
needed to
very-
be realistic.
Let's
Yes,
get real.
50% is probably still high,
How,
but
how does that fit, say, in other organizations of, 1,000 people, whatever we have?
I would say the
How's it
average
compare?
response rate for a survey across the nation, is probably closer to 30%. So even 50% is probably aggressive, but that's my goal.
Yeah.
Because if we don't get 50%, I would then assess why. What didn't work? Why aren't people responding? Is it too long? Does it take too much time? Did they just not see the message?
Right.
Yeah. So the last strategy for goal 1
Is
is,
it, oh, I gotta ask you one other thing.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
no, you're okay.
Is this gonna be on computer? See, that's my next, my follow-up question. So it's gonna be on computer? Is that what it's gonna be?
Ideally, this survey is accessible for anyone, either on a computer, mobilely, paper form.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
have options.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
So the last strategy for goal 1 is by June 2025, I would work with our equity leads to then work with each department and office to establish individual racial equity plans. So the reason that, we have a countywide high-level plan and then we're going into individual department and office plans is because the mission and the services provided for each department office can vary to the extent that their initial focus area for advancing equity and evaluating systemic, racism, institutional racism, evaluating the policies, that can be very different. And so one plan does not fit all in a way that we would want to see success. So the goal here is next year we get our equity leads established, we focus on training, and then in that year, I will have worked with our departments and offices to feel comfortable understanding what they should focus on when developing their individual plans. And that's something that when we report out to you all, you'll be able to see specifically how each department and office is doing and what they're focusing on. So it makes it a little bit more clear for each area on where they can see success.
Didn't we do something similar to this? I think there was zoning or neighborhood association things or something. If you weren't a certain race, you couldn't buy a property or. What did we do? We did something.
What you're recalling is the racist covenants
I
on
think,
the old plats.
yeah, something
Yeah, you
like
did
that.
pass a
But I
resolution.
thought we were going through other portions of our policies.
So
and
we
procedures.
continue to go through that process, but I think the board took an action on passing an ordinance eliminating the racist covenants on approved plats. And the auditor's office is proactive in going through that process. And in fact, we, whomever wants to request, we forego the recording fees in order to achieve that. So that is ongoing process.
But I thought we were also trying to carry that farther along through the
I don't think we,
policies and procedures.
I don't
and-
think we have that type of language in our policies and procedures.
Well, that's what, yeah, that's what I mean. So I thought we'd rectified some of this stuff. And so whereabouts, give me an example of where the change is gonna need to be made on policies, programs, and practices, I guess. I'll just use your words here, but because I know we did some on those communities that had restrictions and filing with the auditor, but I thought we did a little more and eliminated stuff, do you have an example?
So specifically for departments and offices here, no. I've only been here 2
Even,
months,
no,
so
use something else,
Maybe I can
from
help.
elsewhere.
yes.
So when, I think what Libby is keying on this goal, that's strategy is to work with the individual offices and departments as to how they conduct their programs, projects, having an equity lens on what they do. And having an equity lens is really, is changing the approach that we have taken in providing services. And you already had a little bit of taste when, from Public Works, when they came and provide you with a safety plan. And the safety plan had a little bit of a flavor of an equity lens because we went through the demographics and identifying underserved parts of the community. So that is really the intent as to how we can get granular with the offices and departments to look the programs that we have with an equity lens per se.
We covered
Thank
that
you.
with the four-way test.
So and I'll get more
Did-
into
did I-
this. Yeah, that was perfect. And we'll get more
But if
into it in our next goals.
council members are more than welcome to provide perspective as well, so please don't be.
Oh, sure. One of the things that come to mind, Commissioner, for me, are the discussions that we have when we meet as a racial equity council. The questions that we have for staff are how will success, and when we discuss how success might be defined and measured, one aspect of it is that community members, of course, see change, feel change, and of course, uplift and celebrate the changes because they are living through them. The other, I think, we often discuss, what does that look like in terms of like organizational activities? So I imagine we are discussing what functions each department might have. For example, it's already been invoked that the budget department has a particular function and set of responsibilities vested by you all as the board for the county. That plan might be tailored specifically to the success measures that the budget department's function might provide. That might look different for when you think about public health, for example, based on the responsibilities you all have bestowed each of the departments. Those success measures, that is what we talk about at the council. So if I were, for example, to connect with the Department of Public Health here, what does that look like from the perspective of the community member based on why I'm there in the first place? So you also have like the tailoring, not only for the smooth operation of the enterprise here at the county, but also it helps us gain clarity as community members what we can expect, and that ethos to be consistent from the county altogether, from end to end, top to bottom. Those are the questions that I'm sure my council members hear me voice all the time, and we have like very interesting discussions around it because we are also, as residents of Thurston County, we really do hunger for that understanding. What is it that we are ensured as part of the treatment and the expectations and the enjoyments that we'll have living, playing, and working in Thurston
And
County?
there's a racial component to what you're referring to?
I think there's, so the Racial Equity Council is reflective of the mandates that you all put forward. However, one of our early tenets that we established and we continue to wrestle with is the nuance of experience. So while it is the racial equity component, we do have conversations around, for example, ability, accessibility, what does socioeconomic status feel like in this vein? What about gender dynamics? What happens if you move from, say, a more incorporated portion of the county, which was a loss as we shifted at least a physical representation of a council member in that. But what happens if you move from an incorporated area to more of a less incorporated portion of a county? So it's wide in its dimension, and those are the conversations we've been galvanized to have. And so that's the input I would offer, and I saw Kelby, you were gonna say.
Yeah, just to go along with that, the example of our county auditor, it wasn't until the county auditor saw things through an equity lens that she was able to look at the deeds and see the racist language. The racist language had been there for well over 100 years, but it wasn't until they were able to see it through an equity lens that they were able to find it and see more. So the hope is with the training that the department heads are able to give, there will be more of an equity lens. And as far as when we're talking about, racism. An example of that would be, people come to Hawaii and they talk about the continent as the mainland. And Hawaiians have internalized that term. But to Hawaiians, Hawaii is the mainland. And the so-called mainland is the continent. So it's a necessary perspective shift that people just simply aren't aware of. It's actually insulting to tell a Hawaiian that they aren't living in the mainland.
Go down to Tenino, they'll tell you that Tenino's the center of the universe.
Right, right.
I'm not making that up.
They got their own money.
Yeah, they do, so, okay. I'm just curious how that all fits.
You know, I understand, right, and I understand right now that we're kind of at the top of the umbrella, right? And, kind of what I've seen in other racial equity plans is what you're talking about is that step 2 and step 3, right? Once we get through the actual base and the starting point of this living document, then we go into a step deeper and then we start focusing on departments and offices and their own integrated policies and services offered. And then at that point is when that tweaking starts within those, services or policies or whatever it is that's affecting. And then I think the step 3 is just that data gathering, right? The measuring of success and how you measure that success. And so thank you for that perspective, right? I think it is right on point on all the work that we still have to do. And kind of, we are still at the very beginning of this state of setting that high level umbrella on these are the steps that, we need to take in order for us to get to that level of really going down to the nitty gritty of each department and tailoring racial equity to each department, because it is different. Every function in the county is completely different, and the services offered are completely different from department to department, from office to office. And, we're pretty unique in terms of a government body, so. Okay, are we ready for goal 2?
I'm ready.
Goal 2?
Goal 2. So goal 2 actually focuses on the Racial Equity Council, using the council to bridge the gap between our government and our community by strengthening community engagement with education and communication efforts in ways that are inclusive, culturally informed, and socially responsible. And so I believe in the resolution that founded the Racial Equity Council, that was a big component of what the council will do, is serve as that liaison between the community and Thurston County. And so the strategies here focus on that community perspective and building those partnerships to gain support in this work, again, for us to be successful in pursuing systemic change. So the first strategy is really developing a community engagement plan that sets kind of a standard approach for how each department, office, or program can consider equity as they're engaging with the community. So I understand that community engagement for public health will look different from community engagement for public safety. And so even though they have their own unique needs and their own unique community group that they're reaching out, we still want to ensure that consistently there's an equitable approach for how we are getting community feedback and participation from our residents and community groups. The next strategy is to work with the public information officer and departments to identify a strategy to ensure that our county forms and outreach materials are translated in the languages commonly spoken throughout Thurston. And so I think actually we may be a little bit ahead on this one. I believe this is already on the radar of our PIO. And so this one will probably achieve maybe before September 2024, which would be great.
Just in the proposed procedure.
Yay, okay, so.
Doesn't state law address certain percentages in population to
Yeah,
require
the
this?
census is what they give us the you must do. But I think is This is what else we can do.
Okay. I don't know that I agree with that, because I think you should learn English myself. Now, whole nother ballgame, you know, and I have no problem with, we get to a certain amount. I just wonder, where do we draw the line? And that's kind of my own bias, I guess, if you will, that, you know, do we draw that line? Like, we've got quite a Russian community down in Rochester and a Hispanic community down there. So I don't know if we meet the criteria that we must or don't do all the printing and that's what you're referring to, right? So I'm just curious, where do you draw the line?
You know,
There's
and
quite a Vietnamese community in certain areas and stuff,
there's,
so.
I would just, learned there is a significant German community here. And that was one of the proposed languages.
Really?
We make, yeah,
Okay, I can tell I'm behind the curve on some of this, but it's okay.
but, yeah,
I'll
more to
learn.
come.
So that's great to hear, and I, in conversations with our PIO, I know she's been, she's had this on her radar, so that's pretty exciting that we're moving forward in that area. The reason that I say to identify a strategy for, how we ensure county forms and materials are translated is because there is an impact to workload and probably a fiscal impact in how departments and offices are able to translate. Oh, yes, thank you. I recognize that there is a fiscal and workload impact, and so the first part of this is identifying that strategy, what's involved, what do we need in order to support the strategy, so a future goal would be actually moving forward with translating our materials.
And I guess that brings me back to, where do you draw the line?
I think that we would identify that in the strategy, and so I would work with departments and our PIO to figure out what's the best way to move forward so that we are positively benefiting our community members so that they're able to participate in county government with
Do
success.
we print everything in Braille now? I don't know if we do or not. Cause, you know,
That's
this
something
is
that we have to
racial,
look
but,
at. Yeah,
but Braille is
It's
definitely a
providing access,
disability.
and I think what you're saying is providing access, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and, yeah, I mean,
that's an excellent point. That's something that as we develop this strategy on how we translate our materials, it would be what access do our community members need and how are we helping them? So that's something that we would take into
yeah,
account.
practical example, speaking of the Rochester area. The board is considering raising the rates of the water and sewer,
I thought we already did that.
hypothetically,
Okay.
and move into the future. Why not translate the intent of the board to those areas of our community for them to understand what you're planning to do? And that is really a practical outcome of this strategy. I don't think that everything is gonna be translated. It doesn't
No,
make
there has to
sense.
be a level we get to a certain
So it has to
point.
be more granular. It has to be what is it that we need to do in order to reach out to those members of our community. And an example that you may consider raising, you know, the water sewer rates is something that will affect them. And given another piece of information, they can understand what they're planning to do, is what we ought to do.
You know, road signs, that's kind of one of my bugaboos. On getting a driver's license, can't read the road signs, well, I think you should be able to read the road signs. Or are we gonna print them in 7 different languages?
Road
That's
sign-
kind of, somewhere you have to come to a realization that this is practical, this is not.
Yeah,
I'm just
Driven in
curious.
Bulgaria.
What's that?
Said I've driven in Bulgaria.
Is it?
You crash. You learn the signs. I mean, you know,
Oh, yeah, well, that's kind of where I'm coming from, you know.
there's international signs that
So
don't
I
even
think
use words.
that example
Yeah,
perhaps
yeah.
maybe too extreme.
Yeah, maybe, okay.
There's a universality to certain symbols that
Right,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
you know,
transfer
Red means
you know, the hexagon, red, you need to stop.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
But that's an interesting question, where do you draw the line? I've lived in a lot of communities, some were more diverse than others. In the communities I lived in where there was a high degree of diversity, the communities tend to be very vibrant, very open. Mixing cultures led to fusion, like I had guacamole and Szechuan fried rice together, and it was amazing. And I never would have experienced that, ever before in my life. It's kind of like the difference between a diverse forest or a monoculture fiber farm.
I just got a text from our PIO, and it says as follows. One of the benefits of upgrading our website, the website translates automatically in 10 different languages just by clicking a button.
Oh,
It's fantastic, yeah.
So, there you go.
good example.
Thank you, Megan.
Somebody's listening to us.
So with item
She here.
2B, I do agree that we need a policy that covers, right, the whole of the county. I think that's been one of my main things. But it's not just about translating documents, but I also think we need a policy in terms of interpreting and when to access that language access line. And I have experiences on my own as, a dual language speaker when I was pulled from another office to come and interpret for them. And there were, I started the conversations, I'm like, well, why am I getting pulled for, why is no one else accessing the language access line? And, I think there just needs to be an overall policy that covers, the county as a whole, as we are seeing people who might not speak English, and maybe the staff doesn't speak that language either, but there has to be that congruity where they could still access those services without being turned away or being said, oh, you need to bring your own interpreter, or having, as my experience as a child, being, the interpreter for my parents, right? It's just, we don't know if an 11-year-old child is interpreting the correct information to their parents. And then, are we really providing that same level of service to that person? So that is something that, I really do care about. The translation of outreach materials, one of the things that I've noticed as we're moving in this direction is maybe we're using companies that do a variety of languages, and therefore the materials that are coming back really aren't up to par. And
They're using Google Translate.
they're using, I've seen some really bad ones, and I usually go in and I'm redlining it, right? And I'm giving it back and just letting, people know, like, oh, by the way, this is
Right.
not, reach out to whoever did it and have them correct it, right? But I think just when it comes to that, right, I think there should also be that level of service that we're providing, and not just like a Google Translate, and then we're checking off the box, and the materials that we're giving aren't really accurate or don't really reflect the intent of what we're trying to convey.
If I may, intentional actions, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that would be considered, as I work with the PIO, and I will say, I think the interpretation, either she's working on a policy or that's on her radar as well, the interpretation services. And so that's something that I will make sure to include in this so that it's clear we're focusing on both translation and interpretation. Okay, so the third strategy focuses on our partnerships with our county jurisdictions and community organizations to identify events for which the county can participate in that promote diversity and increase cultural awareness. So I know that I've been connecting with the localities within Thurston County and our neighboring jurisdictions, my counterparts in this position, to see what's already happening that the county can participate in as a first step and say, hey, we are supportive, we want our community to be aware of this event and we want to build our community around a certain topic or event. And that way, it's less of a physical impact for sure at the start, because we're not focusing on hosting an event, but finding out what already exists and just saying, hey, we want to participate, we want to be supportive. So that goal is really building those partnerships with these jurisdictions and community events.
So this is one where I've kind of been beating this drum about not just with events, but just, there are counterparts in the other jurisdictions, and, not only do I think you guys can learn from each other, but coordinating what you're doing, and there's things that we could do in saving time and money, like on a training, for example, and because we want our residents to kind of have a consistent racism-free experience across every jurisdiction. So, if we can all pitch in and do the same training, and including Olympia and Tumwater, I mean, that would be awesome.
Yes.
And so the more you can do that, I think we all benefit.
Yes, that has started already. I'm really appreciative of the connection that I made with the Olympia, City of Olympia, my counterparts there. I know King County has done trainings that we're looking at, and so we do want to establish some kind of consistency across our neighboring jurisdictions. And so really it is building those connections and maintaining those partnerships that will help us be successful.
And I think that, when you, and this kind of, I've peeked ahead to goal 3, but when you get into the point of actually changing policies that you've identified as barriers and stuff, like, if we could do that together, I just think that would make, then nobody.
Across jurisdictions?
Yeah.
Oh, that
Yes.
would be awesome.
Be
That'd be
really like
fantastic.
impactful, and it would
Yes.
get in the newspaper, and then people would see the same thing, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of stuff I'm really supportive of, just doing that stuff together.
Yeah, that is what I envision. And ideally, I know that there's groups that are out there that pull together DEI professionals in Washington and in Thurston County and in just different areas. And so those groups, I fully intend to insert myself to be a participant and say, like, how can we collectively improve or review and assess what's happening, and develop consistent language, consistent practices, policies. So it makes it easier for us to do this work.
And it helps with the community when, if it's a controversial thing, for example,
Yeah.
that folks are gonna be, then the education and the consistency will really help.
Yes.
Help everybody. I mean, sometimes people may scratch their head, why is Thurston County doing, why is City of Olympia doing this? But when they see everyone doing it, then I think it kind of mitigates. It makes them, even if they're really opposed to it, it makes them think, I need to look into this a little more. If
Yes.
all the jurisdictions are simultaneously moving this policy change forward, there must be something behind it. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think some people would think that way. And they would look more closely at it and think a little harder about it. And it would help us, gain community
Gain
support for maybe the difficult change we're trying to make.
I agree.
If I may, one of the things, as I'm reflecting on our conversations at the council, one of the things that has come up for us is we're struck by the fact that we are so reflective of the strong, not only diversity, but the multiplicity that makes up the residency here at Thurston County. We occupy different occupations, live in different neighborhoods, and quite frankly, are very much in the mix of the essential and necessary functions that power the ecosystem of this space that we call Washington. So we're meeting ourselves as neighbors, but we're also meeting each other as like a cross-functioning body of experts that are like within education, within library functions, within first response, within the ways in which other forms of government that make up Washington function. And so I'm uplifted because it's reflective of like the conversations we've had, like not just like the strategy to continue to inform and interpret the why this work is being animated, racial equity, equity in general, but also the great benefit of reconnecting as neighbors. That is very much something that we talk about in our meetings with the REC, that whether you have been a resident of Thurston County or a returning resident of Thurston County, or whether you've just gotten here, like, again, 2 years ago, what drew you to this space, and what are things that we feel kind of galvanized to contribute to, because we have such an affection for the space that we live. So yes, definitely cross communication, but also really looking forward at the benefits that we're all really chuffed to be excited to be a part of. So I appreciated that comment, Commissioner. Thank you.
So the last strategy for goal number 2 is looking at barriers in recruiting our community members for serving on our county boards and commissions. And so just some fun little information. So 20% of our population is a person of color or 2 or more races. And so really, if we have ideal participation in our community boards and commissions, that means 1 in every 5 person should be a person of color. Or 50% of our population is women. So, half of our membership on our boards and commissions should be men, half should be women.
Is that, I'm sorry to stop you, but is that unincorporated county? Because I thought our number countywide was 29% BIPOC.
That is including cities. So it's not just unincorporated.
Yeah, but I thought the number was higher than 20%.
This is from census data of 2022. So it could be different based on what specifically unincorporated Thurston was. But the data that I had was from census.
I had a higher number as well.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think
Maybe
something's
we
wrong.
can, maybe we can
We
check that
can,
number.
yeah, so we can,
Check that number.
Anyway,
yeah.
either way, 20 is a lot. I mean, we're probably not meeting a 20% threshold.
Ideally, we have the best representation of the various qualities and characteristics of a person. So again, it's not just race, it's gender, it's sexual orientation, it's socioeconomic status, people with lived experiences. We want representation across all types of people to be serving and participating in our government.
Check.
Yes, so I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly.
Minutes.
So that's goal 2. So let's go to goal 3, which is our last goal, and hopefully we can get through this one pretty quickly. Goal 3 is evaluating existing systems, policies, processes, and programs to identify an equity impact. So this gets to operationalizing equity. And again, it's at a higher level, but the first goal, the first strategy is to actually partner with our criminal justice regional program manager to develop and implement guidelines for basically establishing a data governance. So it will be piloted with our law and justice departments and offices, but ideally then taken to apply across the county. And it's identifying how do we collect data, how are we using it, how are we reporting on it, and really building that trust in our community on when they are voluntarily giving data, they know how we're using it and how it's actually benefiting them. So that first strategy is establishing that data governance. The next strategy is identifying and developing tools and resources to actually aid employees in considering equity through business operations. So this gets to what you were talking about, Commissioner Edwards, is how do we operationalize it? So, for example, when considering budget requests, how are we considering equity in every program and every budget request? There's tools that can be developed and already exist, frankly, that can help employees consider equity as they're requesting things and then as they're considering budget items. The same for human resources, when looking at our, recruitment and retention. How are we considering equity when advertising, when interviewing? And so there's ways that tools can be used for every department and office to help every employee consider equity in their work. And luckily, we don't have to create a lot of these because there's plenty throughout the country that we can use from to tweak and assess and see what fits for Thurston County. The third strategy is to collaborate with directors for really assessing policies and procedures. And again, there's tools that can be used for this, but ideally before a policy comes to you all for review and approval, you will know that equity has been considered in the development of this policy and procedure. And so that's something that I'd be working with our county leadership that's involved in that process to ingrain the consideration of equity in the development of new policies and procedures. The next strategy I'd be partnering with human resources again to assess current conditions and barriers that may be preventing potential candidates from applying and successfully competing for employment with the county. And so this is that recruitment and attention effort, is evaluating what we're doing, what's working, what's not working. How can we reach targeted groups to increase applicants, but also help people be successful as they're competing for these jobs. And then the last strategy is I would work with the equity leads that are established to identify barriers preventing a predictable, transparent, and equitable customer service experience. And that's something that in my professional and personal opinion, I think customer service experiences should be predictable, that customers should know, they should be able to predict what's gonna happen as they interact with the government. It should be a transparent process. They shouldn't be surprised by anything that they're going through. And the way that customers interact with the government when receiving services should be equitable. So there are certain programs that I will look at, and in conversations I'm having right now, I'm evaluating which department has the capacity and the willingness to be the pilot program to kind of assess customer service experience and accessibility to our programs.
Can I go back to item 3D?
Yes.
And I think, that's great, but I also would like the retention piece of it. And because there's also, I would like to see kind of the data of like, well, if we are recruiting and they are, coming, is there a higher turnover, and kind of why is there that turnover? I think that retention piece is also an important component, right? Because we can fix our policies about recruitment and getting great potential candidates, but if we can't retain them, right?
Yeah.
Then we're kind of in that little cycle. And so I think just with that recruitment, the retention piece is also important.
Okay. And I think based on what you are saying, it might be best to just establish a separate strategy to focus on retention, since those can be separate processes and evaluations. So I'll do that.
But that's for everybody, right? Doesn't have to do with racial component, does it?
Well, and, in some forms, sometimes the racial component does play a role, right? And where people just don't feel welcome in an environment, and, whether it's the policy or the system on its own, that it just doesn't make it a very welcoming environment. So then there's, if that's the case, right, we want to be able to address it and fix it and make sure that, it's fixed, right? I think retention as a whole, I think it does affect retention as a whole in the end, right? Because if we're fixing those systems, I think everyone will end up benefiting from it.
So those are all the strategies. The last section of the plan takes language again from the resolution, which is asking for our community support to include our nonprofits, our academia, and our residents, and helping us to see success in the work that we're doing. So with that, again, this is a proposed plan, and it's currently being reviewed by county leadership, council members, and I'm reaching out to some community stakeholders as well to get input. So by the time you get a plan in December, that will have incorporated feedback from you all and from others who have reviewed this to make necessary changes. So over the next couple of weeks, I'll be reaching out to you all individually to chat more in depth about this and get your perspective and questions and concerns.
Is there a particular meeting where the
that the
Racial
5
Equity
o'clock
Council will review?
We have, our next meeting, I believe, is scheduled September
I have my
18th.
magic key.
We will be discussing this plan and also working to establish our bylaws. And so there may be some more frequent special meetings for the council so that we have time to really dive into this plan and
Do you guys meet in here
Here in virtual.
after work or like
yes,
5 p.m. or?
between 4 and 5, yeah. So,
Can you stop sharing?
Okay. Well,
Stop sharing. They're red.
great, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for presentation and are there any additional comments from board members,
No, thank you.
council members?
I wanna say, I just wanna acknowledge DV really hit the ground running, and I appreciate and applaud the hard work and the dedication to the mission. And I think all of the committee members are looking forward to the work, the necessary and fundamental work we'll be doing together.
I wanna thank you, committee members, for sticking through the transition. I mean, you know, it was unfortunate and I was hopeful that people we found would be with us on the other side. And Dee Dee told us that, I think with one exception, you said they all are, so I'm really grateful for that. I hope that we can add a few more people to your roster. I know we have some new applications.
How many do we have now?
Or,
4 applications.
For applications, and they're reviewing those applications now.
And again, you're not limited just to fill the one vacancy.
Right.
You have the resolution can go up.
How many members do we have?
6. Currently, we have 6 members.
We have up to 9.
We can add 3 if we want, if we,
15.
So our goal is to establish the 7th member. The resolution asks for a minimum of 7. So we're gonna establish our 7th member, make sure we get our bylaws sent to you for review and approval. And then work to fill the remaining memberships. We can have up to 15.
Was somebody upset over the transition? Is that what I'm hearing?
no. I
No,
didn't-
no, they
It
moved.
just, yeah, I wasn't suggesting that. I just didn't know. It took, you know, I don't know how long there was
the
a
gap.
gap between
There's a gap,
meetings,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, it was just, you know, it was a fairly new committee to begin with,
Yeah.
and so to have that gap, I was afraid we'd lose some of our, you know, good, you know, volunteers, and I'm glad.
They're
that didn't
here.
happen.
I am grateful.
okay. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for really being here today for the presentation. Council members, thank you, as Commissioner Munster stated, for sticking with us through the transition and for being patient with us as, you know, we find our own footing in this whole process. Okay, 5:03 PM, we are adjourned.